So hopefully by this time you guys have already saved all of your images as PNG images. You've correctly given the names with underscore and numbers to have them all in sequence. So we should be ready to start using a TexturePacker so we can create an atlas file. Okay. Now with libgdx, if you've added the tools to your project, which if you've been following me in these videos, then you would have. TexturePacker is a way that we can bind one image file instead of multiple image files, like what I was saying, and speeding up the drawing and helping to optimize. Now, in libgdx, we can do it by creating a small static project, have it automatically packed for us, and then we're done, and then we can just go ahead and run our game. If you wanted more of a text, like a visual, there are multiple versions out there. If you just search libgdx and then you did TexturePacker, you would come to this GitHub page where it has the wiki for it, and you could go ahead and click on this one. This one, it has been updated. They are staying current on it. The one that I use is actually older, but it was the base code that is used for this. So I'm using Ribbon's application that works, the same way. So let's look at a TexturePacker. Okay, so if you are using a visual TexturePacker, basically what you're doing is you're choosing an input directory. So you're choosing the folder that is holding all of those images, and then you're choosing an output directory where it is going to store that atlas file and the PNG that is associated with it, with all of the stuff already built out. Okay. After you do that, it's really pretty easy to set this up. You just basically choose your input, you choose your output, you choose your name, and then you are just going to pack them. You could change, if you do anything other than this, then you will lose some transparencies. You could adjust size if you wanted. 2048 is the largest page width or height that you can do. Usually it's always squared, so they will change themselves. Okay, and then basically once it's done, it's going to show you all the images there. You don't have to worry if it turns or rotates the images or moves them around, if they're not all located in the same place. I showed you what that atlas was basically doing. It is able to pull all of that stuff together. Okay, so this is the visual. Let me show you what if you were building an asset packer by hand and you've already added the tools. Okay, all we really need to do is we just need to so let me just minimize some of this. Okay. All we really need to do is we need to create an asset packer class that really is just going to run the main, which all it's doing when it's running the main is just to set up the TexturePacker. We can set our width for the settings, and then all we're doing is just telling it to process. It's all static methods for what our input path is, what our output path is, and what our file name is. Okay, so that's it. It's really not doing a lot of complex stuff that we have to worry about. We just set it and forget it. Okay, and then we would just run it directly, and then we could go back to our project. Okay, so if we were to do this manually setting it up, okay, so let's go to our Redbeard run, or your version of your game. Okay, we want to do the desktop because we're going to run it directly from the desktop. Okay, I'm going to right click and do a new Java class. Let's just call this Atlas Packer. All right. So once we have it set up, Let's look at what we need. It is not extending or inheriting anything. All we really need to do is just do the settings and then start setting the settings. Okay, so let's go ahead and build that. Okay, so I'm going to add a public static void main method that's going to ultimately set that up. And then I'm going to add public static final string, and then this is going to be my input path. Input path. Okay. So the input path that we have is where our assets are located. So if I go into Android under assets, this sprites folder, that is going to be what I need, and then I need this input right here. So it would be sprites, spelled exactly how you have it set up, input, and then that's pretty much it. Okay, now our output path, public static final string output path, and that is going to be where we want it to go. So I want to put mine back in the sprites. Now I don't have to do a full name because I'm already pointing everything in libgdx to access from the Android assets folder. So I just need to worry about my folder structure here. So I want it in the sprites and I want it in the output folder. Okay, output folder. And then we are basically set up to run our stuff. If I wanted to add an additional folder, I mean, that's fine. So we want the TexturePacker. TexturePacker equals new texture. Oops. We want TexturePacker settings. TexturePacker settings, and that's what we're doing. Because we're setting the settings that we want, and then we're just processing. Okay, so TexturePacker dot settings right there, settings equals new TexturePacker settings. Now with our settings, we can access all kinds of stuff on how we want it to pack. Okay, and using this TexturePacker resource that I showed you on the wiki, this will give you more details on the types of configurations that you want. You can set anything that you want. Okay, I do want to set a max height, and I'm going to set it to 2048, and I want to set settings for max width, and I want to set that to 2048. So what that's going to do is that's going to switch my sizes. So if I can't fit all of my images on 2048 pixels, then it's going to create a separate image file, but there's only one atlas file, and the atlas file is going to manage what images is pulling from either the first packed image or the second packed image. Okay, so after that I can pretty much just go TexturePacker.process, and I got to pass in stuff. So I'm going to pass in the settings that I did for the sizes, and then my input path, my output path, and my name. So I want to process, and I'm going to pass in the settings. I'm going to pass in my input path. I'm going to pass out my output path, and then I'm going to give the name. Now it's a string. So I want Let's call it Redbeard Run Atlas. Okay. Now, just so you can see that I don't have that already, I pulled this stuff from my original one. So it's going to create a file called Redbeard Run Atlas, and it's going to be a .atlas file. Okay, so that's all that I need to run it. Again, this is your input path, your output path, and then your name of your file. Okay, so when I'm running this, I'm not running my desktop to automatically run my desktop launcher. I want to just run this class. So I'm going to run this method. We should see it building, and then it's going to process all the images. If you're using certain assets for a load screen, you do not want to pack them in this atlas. You would want to do a separate one for just loading screen images so that it will be able to load faster, because it's only having to worry about the images that you're immediately going to use. But other than that, so ultimately you will end up having two. So I have, like, this is my loading screen atlas. I just wanted a few frames to build an animation and my words for my stuff. And then I have my other one for everything else. Error packing images. Let's see what it says. Input file does not exist. Redbeard Run sprites input. Now look at what the issue is. The issue is I did not actually spell input right. That is a capital I. So let's go back in our TexturePacker, and I need to change my input to a capital. Let's go ahead and run it now, because now it's showing us the Atlas Packer running. And it still does not see it, which is awesome. Do 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 do. Sprites. Let's just double check. All right. File does not exist. But I did drag that in there. Oh, you know what? It's because I need to rebuild, because I put those files in there. So if you drag folders in, you're going to have to restart your entire project. You're going to have to rebuild your project so it can see them. Oh, yeah. Taking forever to run. All right, I'm going to pause it. I'll come back on once it's finished building. Okay, it finished building the project. I'm going to run it again. Input. TES INPUT. Oh, you know what? Edit. Because it is pulling the working directory. That's why it needs to pull it from Android assets. That's why I couldn't find it. So, third time's the charm. All right. So let's look at what it did. It went to input. These are all of the files that it did. And then it output the Redbeard run atlas.png. Okay. So let's look at the atlas. These are all the files that it did. So this is the whole image. Let's look at the atlas file. So see index 1, index 2. It built this all for me. Arrow left, arrow right. Okay. I have all of these. They're all set up for where they're going. And it only went to one file. Okay. If I was rebuilding this and I had much smaller, it's going to compile it differently. But that is how you would create an atlas file, which is very important for you guys to optimize your code. So again, what we did is we created a simple class to build it. Was very fast to do this. We just used the TexturePacker settings. Basically just set the size. We set the input path, the output path, and the name, and just pass in those settings and let it do its work. Issues that we had: if the file or folder that you are trying to locate is not correctly named here when you're passing it in, it will not find it and it will error out. Other issue is if you are running a class by itself to just quickly build, you need to go into edit configurations and change your working directory. Every time that you make a change, you need to rebuild and repack your atlas. So if you are watching your animations and you're like, oh, those are some stupid animations, and you go to fix, you need to repack your atlas. If you are adding some more characters, you need to repack your atlas. Everything should go in that one folder, that input folder. Make sure that you are naming them so that they are all in sequence and they all need to be PNG files. This will also pack the patch 9 files, which will allow you to have resizable asset type stuff. You can also pack those, and those will be fine. The GUI packer works in the same way. You are putting an input directory, an output directory, and then you are changing, you're giving your file name and you're packing all of them. Okay, so you can pack. The reason why I have it broke up. So if you wanted to organize your stuff where you had all of the animations together for one, attack or anything, it's going to build that as a region. I found it a whole lot easier and I didn't have to mess around with it if every single one was a separate image file that you numbered correctly, because you can go in and build it by region. So whatever way you do it, when you end up with your atlas, this is what we are going to use to be able to start building all of our animations and everything using Ashley. So we need to make sure that we have the names exactly how we want and that it's correctly indexing. If not, you need to go back and rename your files. After that, this next video, we're going to start incorporating into our game, which means that we're going to have to add an animation component that is going to hold the animations for our entity. We need to build out to accommodate those animations getting added into our game through the entity manager. So whenever an entity is created, we can have those animations get added to them. We also should use asset managers. So I'm going to have a video showing how to do that. That's probably going to actually be the next one for setting up asset manager for having. So we are only loading the texture atlas once, not multiple times for every entity. We're loading one copy of it. That copy is going to be used for pulling all of the animations. And then we need to set up the system so that we can change our textures for, in sequence to be able to build out those animations for our characters. Okay? All right. So we got a number of videos, quite a bit of work that we got to do. But having the texture atlas, that's the first step. All right. Good luck. Have fun.